A portion of the HR budget comes over from the utilities because the shared service departments are accounted for inside the utilities, and then a portion is allocated over to the city. And we, through the budgeting process, when we went through that, we budgeted and had them even, but there was a changeover on the utility side, and we didn't make that change reflective over on the city side. And so I don't recall exactly how much it is, but it's, I want to say over the course of the year, it's probably less than 20,000.
Okay. Just curious because you mentioned it in your report. So then the other thing that I had, I just wanted to get clarity on the unassigned funds. Oh, I don't know, it's halfway through your report. $13 million.
Yes.
Maybe you could give me just a little bit as to, that's in the general fund. Is that that's been pretty static relative to our position as to where we've been and where we are currently?
No, if memory serves, we had about 9 million at the end of the last fiscal year, but the 1.4 million that came in for the CARES Act, that was on top of anything that we had planned budget wise.
So that goes in here.
That goes into that number. And so we very likely will end up with a healthy surplus at the end of this, in the end of 2020.
Thank you.
Councilman Ellis. Brad, can you turn off?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Revenue types. I'm sorry, the business on the revenue type, is that business meaning the power plant?
On the
Or-
first page, are you referring?
I'm on the first page of the spreadsheets. Revenue types, we got property tax, franchise business.
The business, it's a tax. The heading there is
Business
tax. So it's business tax. It's the food and beverage tax, the lodging tax, the garbage haulers tax, all those occupation taxes. So that's
Okay.
where that
So do
comes
we
from.
claim the funds that we get from the Department of Utilities as revenue? Shouldn't that
No.
be? It's not.
It's a transfer. So if you go to the second page there,
Okay.
it's buried in the number that comes over in the transfers in.
Transfer
Yep.
out, 4 million. Thank you very much. I was looking for that.
Mhm.
City attorney, looks like we're only at 24%. We budget 346. Is that on the city side or is that for both? City?
That would just be on the city side.
So total, and we split that bill half and half?
Yes.
So, okay, so total of 700, close to 700.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Coons,
I make a motion to approve the motion for the quarterly financial statements.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 6, motion authorizing the mayor to sign agreement with IMA Inc. for health insurance broker services. This time we'll have staff report.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Human Resources Director. This is agreement for IMA, who are the broker for medical insurance and disability and dental. And this is just renewal of the contract. It is, they have kept their rates as last year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Yerger.
Yes, I just had a couple for a reason for pulling this off. So when this was an extension, as I read the staff report. So we're just extending this existing contract for a year, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And when this original contract was this granted by the use of a resolution and a resolution number? to your knowledge?
I could not tell you off the top of my head.
It would be normal, wouldn't it?
I couldn't tell you. I can tell you the staff report is a copy of almost exactly what we did last year. But I couldn't tell you what we've done in the past with that.
The reason for my asking that question is one of making sure that we have a transparent record with regards to contract approvals and extensions and the like. And although I did not find it on my own, my belief is that this would have had a resolution number. And as a result, this extension would have been probably appropriate for us to refer back to the original contract and the resolution approval with regards to this extension. So if one was trying to look at this material historically, we would have these two items tied together, the original contract and the extension. And so my plea is that we really should do it that way. And how we craft the motions tonight might be important to make sure that we get that taken care of appropriately. The other thing I wanted to be clear of is we're authorizing the mayor to sign this particular agreement extension. I assume the mayor signed the original contract.
Yeah, again, this exactly last year.
And my reason for asking that is that the agreement says the client is going to sign, and it wasn't a pre-printed title or anything in this regard on this agreement that it was going to be the mayor signing this agreement, although it would be my belief he would be the appropriate party. And I guess I would ask legal counsel if that would be correct.
Yes, that is accurate.
Okay. Those are my questions for so far.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Seeing none, any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. In the past, when we have financial agreements and contracts, that's always been by resolution. And I would ask legal as well as administration and Jennifer why there is a detour from that. And typically when we have amended the resolutions, we've had a resolution to amend the original resolution. And yet this seems we're suddenly there's a slight change in how we're presenting tonight.
Any other comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
So I'm unclear as to exactly what the wording on this motion is going to be, and you're going to call for that motion, I assume, to be made. Is there pre-described language for this motion other than what we see on the agenda title? Is there language that's going to be put forth for this motion?
Councilmember Yerger, if I may, Travis Jagat, City Attorney. If the council moves to authorize the mayor to sign this contract as it is, that would be sufficient from the city's perspective, from it being properly authorized. Making a motion to approve would be sufficient language enough.
Well, I didn't want to be the one to make a motion. I believe this belongs on resolution, and I like the use of resolutions because I think it gives a trail to the public. It gives a trail to the council and to legal with regards to being able to find these items. It also gives us an opportunity to review the language that we're going to be voting on before we do this on the fly, which we've attempted to do some motions on the fly before. And I know council members have looked kind of starry-eyed at times. What was the language that we just discussed? Because it is not before us. And the use of resolutions clearly does that, and I think is a much better tool than just doing motions. So to the extent that this is going to be a motion, I want an opportunity to hear what that motion is to see whether or not I need to make an amendment to the motion. So I'm not making the motion, but I'd like to hear it and have an opportunity to amend if necessary.
So in the memo, the request is to a motion authorizing the mayor to sign the AMI agreement. the IMA agreement for services. So that would be the motion. That's the recommendation from staff.
So if that's the language of the motion, just as it was written in the agenda, at a minimum, I would want to include for the mayor to sign a 1-year extension, because that's what this is for. And I think it's important for us to memorialize that aspect of this agreement. It is for a 1-year extension.
The term and termination of the agreements in paragraph 2 of the contract.
It's in the language, yeah.
Yeah, I understand it's in the language. Here's something that troubles me, legal counsel. Open Meetings Act requires that we have sufficient enough information in the agenda material without the public going to the packet material to understand exactly what the council has before us. And the motion, item number 6, says the mayor will sign the agreement, but it doesn't indicate that it's a 1-year extension of the existing agreement under resolution such and such previously approved. And that's what I'm getting at. And so I think that by making the motion simply the motion to assign the agreement doesn't give the public the inkling of what that agreement says without going to the packet. And I believe that's a problem under Open Meetings Act.
I would just say that if the Open Meetings Act were to be interpreted that way, we'd have to put all the terms to the contract on the agenda. It's sufficiently noticed to the public. If the council's approving the contract, I don't have a problem with the motion as it was proposed on the agenda.
So just to be clear, the motion is as ascribed in item 6, no more words other than what's before us.
I'm saying I would be fine with that. You're
No,
welcome.
I'm asking, I guess I'm asking the clerk, whoever's making the motion, is that going to be the wording? Motion authorizing the mayor to sign agreement with IMA for health insurance broker services, period. That's the motion.
Yes.
Are there any other comments from council? Councilman Ellis?
Just want to ask the clerk, have we, in the past, when we've had contracts that we've had signed, have they been resolutions or have they been motions?
So in our email that we had back and forth regarding this issue,
Yeah.
I mean, resolutions are a tool that can be used to,
Kind of
be able
memorialized,
to
right?
put
Yeah.
some things together. Now, the council taking action on a motion to approve carries the same legal weight as if it's approved by resolution. With a resolution, you can provide conditions, preconditions for, so if there was some kind of precondition to the mayor signing this, such as allowing 45 days to pass before the mayor signs it, then that's something that you could put in a resolution so that everybody understands what's supposed to occur before the mayor takes action. This item, you would expect the mayor to take action on it immediately without those types of preconditions. And so, I mean, the item being approved would be the item that's in the agenda packet materials. And that would include the terms and supporting information for this agreement.
I would propose that the council in one of our study sessions talks about this detail, because it just doesn't feel right to me. We're spending city council money here for another year. We're spending city money here. And I would just as soon, like Councilman Yerger said, memorialize it so it's easier to find, easier to track, as opposed to just a simple motion. So something that we can look at in the future. I would encourage us as a council to continue down the resolution mode, just because it is easier to find, easier to track, and it doesn't appear to save us that much time. So I would encourage us.
One thing that we could begin doing, if tracking is the primary issue here, is provide contract numbers for each contract that the city council takes action on. That would be just as simple as a resolution number. And
Something that's at least searchable. I mean,
Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion language to insert the words for a 1-year extension after the word agreement.
Well, the motion would be to authorize the mayor to sign agreement with IMA or to sign agreement for 1 year extension with IMA for health insurance broker services. Is there a second? Councilwoman Ganem,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Moving on, item 7, motion to approve change order.
Oh, we got it.
Oh, my fault.
So on that kind of item, there was a motion to take action, and so you would need to amend a motion.
Just by the wording of it, if someone wants to make a motion to approve the contract as the language was just amended to by the council, that'd be fine. Even though there was no original motion on the floor to be amended, just to clean it up, we should just approve the motion as was just approved.
So we need another vote. Okay. Councilman Jensen,
I will make the amended motion. Will that suffice? The motion to approve the amended motion.
Councilman Legman,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Now moving on to item 7, motion to approve change order with Houssaye Levine for on-site meetings. We'll have staff report from Jennifer Dam.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is a request to amend or to approve an amendment to the contract with Houssaye Levine in the amount of $14,040 so that the consultants can attend the meetings that are tentatively scheduled for August, September, and October that relate to the housing framework, economic development framework, downtown sub-area plan, the UDC district use and standards, the facilities, utilities, services, annexation and growth, general development and sign standards, the long-range transportation plan, and subdivision administration and enforcement strategies as in-person meetings instead of web meetings. As they are spelled out in the scope of work today, those meetings would all be web meetings, and we feel that it would be more beneficial to have those meetings occur in person in Fremont. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Can you confirm that the original approval of Houssaye Levine to be consultants relative to the comp plan, traffic study, et cetera, was resolution 2020-201?
I don't have that in front of me, the resolution number in front of me.
Councilman Jensen.
The extra cost for these additional meetings, does this include, if necessary, having interpreters there?
No, it does not include interpreters. This is simply travel costs for the consultants.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont, Nebraska. And Mr. Yerger, you did make the correct reference to the correct resolution, Resolution 2020-201. In there, it did not specifically state webinar only. It had in-person meetings and it had public meetings. I'm not really sure why your packet does not contain the original language because you have several new members on the city council that have never seen it. And you may not know that the copy of it is an October 13th, 2020 agenda. You'd have to go back and start researching. And this is not too far off the beaten track, somewhere, somehow you have to start being able to track resolutions so you can find them. If they're not included in your agenda, you should all be familiar because this is an ongoing, dynamic contract. You have had changes prior. And this isn't something that's going to remain static until its fruition and it's on the table. I don't necessarily agree with these changes because I believe your in-person meetings were actually part of your approval on the resolution 201. But since I can't prove that because I didn't bring a copy for all of you, and I don't know that any of you actually have a copy, you should have at least bare minimum been given a copy so you understand exactly what that contract contained and what it allowed for. There were public meetings. There were some face-to-face. It wasn't all webinar. And I don't know how many of those have been had. But if you had that language to that contract in front of you, had you been reviewing that prior to the meeting tonight, you'd understand and there'd be maybe a little bit better communication on what was included or what not. So perhaps maybe this is something that needs to be continued. I don't know, but that's your decision.
Any other comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Ellis.
The community brought up a great question here as far as, man, I really wish I had that resolution in front of me or at least in the packet so we could look to see. Jennifer, do you know if there was reference in the original resolution for on-site and now they're wanting to be paid for that additional?
The scope of work specified a certain number of on-site meetings and a certain number of web meetings. The 3 meetings that are in front of you tonight were specified as web meetings in the scope of work. And we are now asking that those be in-person meetings so that there can be a more robust conversation.
Okay, so there will be no web meetings at all. They'll all be on-site meetings.
There may be some web meetings in the future, but these particular meetings, sorry about that, would be in person.
Again, this is a motion, and I think in the future, a resolution, specifically since we're spending money again, would be nice to have instead of a motion tied back to the original resolution. So, thanks.
Councilman Yerger.
Well, I share the concern raised in the public, and I share Mr. Ellis's comments as well. I guess I'm not sure what to do with this necessarily with regards to looking to legal, if in fact what we had was a contract with 3 on-site meetings that we're now changing to, 3 remote meetings that are now going to be on-site at an additional cost of $14,000. That's what we're actually doing. And you've looked at that original contract and what we're doing here?
No, I have not done that myself. Jennifer would be the one to ask about what specifically Houseo Levine is the scope of work they're asking to amend. But if we want to look back to see what was actually in the contract, we have to look at the contract. The resolution wouldn't tell us what we need to look at. And I think, I don't know if anyone from Houseo Levine's on to explain why they want 3 more in-person meetings.
No, it's not House of Levine, it was staff. So when Jennifer came to me, she said the next 3 meetings are planned on web. And I said, oh, wow, COVID's over. Let's not do these on web. And let's see if we can get them here. And she said, I don't think we can because it's in the scope of work that they were going to be web. And I said, I would prefer that they not be web or hybrid, both web and in person. And so it was staff's request that we asked them for a change order to change those to in-person meetings.
And this is their estimated cost.
And this is their estimated cost. So it's purely Jennifer and my decision to bring them here because we just don't feel that if you're going to meet with the planning commission, you're going to meet with steering committee, you're going to meet with the public, that they be web. It's just not going to work. So, and you're right, resolution has nothing to do with it, nor in resolution do we ever refer back to the prior resolution, but we just don't do that. And the only people that keep track of resolution numbers are the clerk. That's it. goes to the point, if you want to do this right, let's get them here. If you don't want to do it right, do it over the web. You'll have a handful of people and it won't be very successful.
Councilman Yerger, Councilman Legband.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate that Mark, the remark just made, I think it'd be great to have them here. I think this is money well spent. Things have changed. COVID is hopefully about over with. I'd like to have a lot more in-person meetings. I think it would be very beneficial for us to have the in-person meetings. And I think this would be money well spent for us.
Councilman Jensen.
I'll pair what Councilman Legman said there. You like to use words like transparency a lot around here. This is making it more transparent, getting more people, giving them better opportunities to be involved. Yes, it's going to cost a little more money, but as Marcus said, I believe it's money well spent.
Councilwoman Ganem.
We want as many people involved as possible, and in-person is always a better option. Or if you have the combined webinar and in-person would probably be the best setup. But it's very difficult to participate in a web presentation. I know that from having missed a council meeting and participated by web, and you don't really get to participate very much. You get to vote, but talking, and you don't get to really share your comments.
Councilman Coons.
I'll make a motion to approve the change order with Housing Levine.
Councilman Yerger.
I'd like to make amendment to the motion to approve the change order to read, motion to approve the mayor to sign a change order to resolution 2020-201 with Hosel Levine for on-site versus online meetings at a cost of $45,000. Or excuse me, $14,040.
I think the motion would be to make a change order to the contract that was approved by resolution 2020-01 or whatever the number was.
We can amend before asking for a second.
Well, yeah, the amendment is a privilege motion that supplants the initial motion.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilman Coons. We have an amendment from Councilman Yerger. I have to address Councilman Yerger's amendment. Okay, is there
And that, excuse me, Mayor, does that need to include the language that you just gave? And so do we need to read that back out again for council because you amended what I had amended?
Yeah, I recommended that you change your amendment to include
Okay, so let me
reference to
see.
the contract.
So let me see if I captured it and I'll read it out one more time, if that's okay. Motion to approve the mayor to sign a change order, to sign a change to the contract approved in resolution 2020-201 with Hosel Levine for 3 on-site versus online meetings at a cost of $14,040. Is that?
Yep, and this vote will just be to amend the original motion to just approve it.
Right.
Okay, Councilman Legband.
Yes, this is another question for you. Is there a need for that?
As I said before, no, but it's up to the council.
Councilman Ellis.
I second that amendment.
Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 5-3.
Let's just keep moving forward. You know, now we're gonna vote on the amended motion. So is there a motion to approve the amended motion as presented? Councilman Legband.
I'll make that motion to approve the amended.
Councilwoman Ganem,
Second,
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Are we good? Legal? Okay. All right, moving on. Item 9, motion to renew service agreement with the Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging at the Friendship Center. This time we'll all staff report. Go ahead, Nate.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Nate Schwanke, Interim Director of Parks and Recreation. So what you have in front of you here is our renewal with Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging. They are a governing body that helps with funding for our senior center and other programs in our community for the elderly. I would be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Any questions for Nate? Councilman Yerger?
I think you just said your title is interim. So at page 12 of this agreement, whatever, where it asks for the contractor, director of Parks and Recreation to sign.
Mhm.
You're probably going to be the one to sign.
Yep.
So we should probably modify the title listed in here as acting.
Interim, I would say, yeah.
Thanks. Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Legman?
I don't see any more people wanting to talk, so I'll make a motion to renew the service.
Councilman Yerger?
Would want to amend the motion to recommend to at least fix the agreement to change the title that's being utilized on page 12 of the agreement. So the proper party can sign the agreement as indicated earlier.
Mayor, I think the mayor is signing the agreement, but if Councilman Guerrero, if you want the interim director also referenced to receive notice under Article 8.
That's where I'm at, Article 8.
12. So that's just to receive notices under the contract. The interim director would be considered the director for this purposes of this section.
Do you think we don't need to?
We don't need to for that, for purposes of notice, no. And the mayor is the one signing it, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, I'll yield.
There's a motion to renew service agreement with Eastern Nebraska Office of Aging at the Friendship Center. Is there a second? Councilman Jensen.
I will make that second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now moving on to unfinished business. Ordinance 5575 to approve an amendment to the Bluestem Commons Plan Development. This would be for final reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is the third and final reading for an amendment to the Bluestem Commons Plan Development. It would allow the units that are on lots 1 through 24, Block 4, lots 1 through 10, Block 5, and lots 1 through 16, Block 8, to be constructed either as attached duplexes or detached single-family units. I would be happy to answer any questions at this point in time.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Jensen.
Well, I will make the motion to approve ordinance, approve going to final reading of ordinance 5575.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Exhibit A of ordinance number 5528, specifically portions of the Blue Stem Commons plan development described as lots 1 through 24, Block 4, lots 1 through 10, Block 5, and lots 1 through 16, Block 8, and more generally located west of North Luther Road and 34th Boulevard, Dodge County, Nebraska, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
The ordinance is approved 8-0.
Moving on to new business. Item 11, motion authorizing city staff to sign amendment to the Holstone wastewater services agreement. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, this item relates to item 13. So when we brought the bid tab to you at the last meeting, there was discussion about the agreement with Holstone and what portion they were going to pay. We've met with Holstone and negotiated they're going to pay $10 million. That's the number that we initially had talked to them about several years ago. This agreement codifies that. It amends the prior agreement that we have. By that agreement, it has to be amended to fill in these blanks, and the blank would be the $10 million that's in this amendment agreement. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And Troy will talk about the contract with Erickson at the next on 13. So.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yurger.
Well, I understood your explanation to include the fact that this did go through as an earlier resolution for the full agreement. I believe that was resolution 2020-072. So there is a multi-page document here in which we are modifying, as you just indicated. So it certainly seems to me in this particular case, if not in the others, this one definitely needs a referral to the original resolution so that there can be congruence between the original contract or agreement that we had and what we're amending here. So that seems to be an imperative for me. The other thing that's I'm interested in knowing is typically these kinds of things would go through the Utility Infrastructure Board, would they not?
That's right. We did take this, right?
Yeah.
What's that? Yes, we did.
And when did that go through?
I think in the staff report, I put June 8th. Did we have it on the agenda that we just had today? I don't remember that. The way? You want to come up to Mike?
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. The contract was on today. The 10 million was on the week before.
Oh, the prior meetings. It's 10 million was on prior meetings.
I believe, yeah.
I don't remember. You might want to go back and look at the agendas. I don't.
I raised that question because it's one of those things that would be documented if we were using resolution whereas statements, because we have been routinely seeing this has gone through the Planning Commission on X date with such and such a vote. This has gone through the UIB board on such and such a date with X vote. And that way we know when this comes to council, we have a recommendation from the underlying boards or commissions with regards to their feelings about the changes that are being forthcoming. And on this particular item, those aren't here. And if they were available before, they should have been made available and known to us when the Wednesday agenda came out, according to council policy. If they were done today, then that meeting isn't appropriate to be included in tonight's meeting because of the council agenda policy, because it supersedes last Wednesday's due date. So for those reasons, I guess it seems to me that this item should be continued to the next meeting so that we can codify the UIB's recommendations appropriately. I make a motion to continue to the next meeting.
So the agenda policy, item number 4 in the agenda policy is the final agenda and supporting materials will be posted to the city's website before the end of the 4th day prior to the date of the meeting. That's Friday.
The only ones that can make changes after Wednesday are not planning commission or city staff, either one. Your deadlines are on Wednesday.
No, that's not what. the
Are we
policy
talking about
says.
references to a UIB?
I'm talking about the references to
Recommendation?
the city policy with regards to
Well, I know, but
when things are due.
what should have been put on the agenda that wasn't in time? Are you
The-
referring to the UIB vote that?
Yeah,
I
they
think took
had
place
a
today?
meeting after the Wednesday deadline.
Yeah.
Actually, if they had a meeting today,
Yeah.
then the material wasn't and isn't includable in today's city council meeting. It's not includable till the next meeting.
I think it's
Items
public-
and backup from the mayor, city staff, boards and commission, end of the 7th workday prior to the date of the meeting, bullet point A.
I think it's public information anyway. It's, if the council would like.
It doesn't matter. We have a policy, Travis, and we need to follow it.
Certainly.
You're missing the whole
I don't think
point.
there's packet material that was added after that.
Yeah, no, there wasn't in this item. It was never added.
I'm saying I don't think the policy was violated, so.
The staff report says that this will be considered at the June 8th meeting.
Yeah.
That's the day. That's not last Wednesday.
Do you have a question about the UIB meeting that occurred?
No, because any report from the UIB meeting on June 8th will come at the next city council meeting. My motion to continue this item stands as originally given.
Oh, for sure. I just want to make sure. the
And I
council
wasn't sure,
understands.
I'm not sure that items to continue are debatable.
I'm not debating with you. I'm trying to express a legal opinion that the adding whether a advisory board to this council voted one way or the other, providing that information the day of the meeting, that does not violate the city council policy. But certainly if you feel you would like that information prior to today, then that's.
I'd
your
like those items to
political
be included as
aspirations.
resolutions so that we know that these boards and commissions have actually authorized what we're being asked to authorize ourselves. Otherwise, we don't need them because they're not giving us any recommendations. They have a job and I'd like to respect those jobs and they have to respect our timeline for when the material should be given and in our packet.
Oh, certainly. yeah.
And their votes are not in our packet tonight.
Certainly, and that's a political question, and a resolution doesn't provide any more authority outside the contract. When the council approves the contract, that's what's legally binding.
Sure.
A recital isn't a term of a contract that you file for a breach under, so to speak. Which would be, a recital is a whereas statement.
A motion continue on the floor.
Councilman Ellis? Ready. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 5-3.
Wait, that's continued. Okay. All right, moving on. Item 12. Motion authorizing city staff to sign contract with Thompson Construction for roadway subdivision water system. This time we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. In 2016, the city agreed to a conditional annexation agreement with roadway subdivision landowners, which stated that the city would construct a complete water system, serve all properties within the roadway subdivision. That was to be completed at or about the same time the Costco improvements were done. Those were done in March or April, I believe, of last year. We were unable to bid this from COVID. The engineering firm didn't get us the plans. So this is the bid for the water plans for the roadway subdivision. There were two bids that were very competitive with an $800 on basically $500,000. So we recommend giving the award to Thompson Construction. It went through the UIB today. We're sending it to the council on the same day because we are in an environment where contractors are not holding their prices longer than 2 or 3 weeks sometimes. And we don't have time to wait the additional 2 weeks to come back for council. They won't hold their price. So that's why it's on the UIB and the council at the same time. And the UIB voted today 3-0 to approve.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Can you re-educate me on the roadway subdivision and where that is or who that is?
That's on Morningside Road and Old 275 coming in. It's where I'm not from Fremont. It's where the old strip club used to be. That's
Uncle Larry.
what the building is, the Lariat. There you go.
Starts there, goes north.
And goes
Morningside.
north towards Morningside, not quite all the way.
Okay, well, personally, you've left me in a quandary here. I understand your dilemma with regards to the urgency of getting something accomplished. I'm sympathetic to that. When we're spending $400,000 plus, it certainly seems to me this is worthy of a resolution. Recognition that you selected the lowest bidder, which you did, but typically those are stated as part of our whereas statement, so it's codified or indicated to support the fact that that was the decision made by staff. And what's in here is something that looks an awful lot like a resolution, because this agreement and the whereas statements and the now therefores are pretty much exactly what we see in a resolution, except this wasn't given a number, even though it's worth over $400,000. And to me, these items, as it's indicated here, would be signed by the mayor. Your staff report says the staff should sign, but clearly the non-resolution agreement that's to be proposed here is to be signed by the mayor. So there are several issues here of just procedural problem for me, even though I'd like to do this, because I think it, like I said, I'm sympathetic to the fact you need to put these contracts in place in a timely fashion. But I think this one fell into the trap of, we could have cleanly done this on a resolution. Clearly, we had a problem with the UIB meeting the policy as we just described, because they just met and voted on it today. And we already did several months ago clean this up so that those things wouldn't happen when the UIB was meeting every time on the meeting day that we had, and that got changed. So.
Councilwoman Ganem?
No, I understand that. I know procedures, and I do understand and the commitment and saving money for taxpayers though, because these contractors and people in business are not keeping their prices the same. You go back the next day sometimes and it has risen. We can watch that in lumber already. So I would certainly support trying to move this forward.
Councilman Jensen?
I'll echo Councilman Gaddams, we need to move forward on this. We seem to be hung up on the word motion here. That seems to be the theme for tonight. And I'm more worried about the people of Fremont than I am about words and dotting i's and crossing t's. Let's get this done.
Councilman Ellis?
I too understand the construction world right now is crazy in dollar amounts. And I'm okay. I'm not okay with this because this looks like a resolution. There's whereas clauses, what we, explained to me just a half hour early would define a resolution. So I'm disappointed that we went down the path of motion instead of resolution. I don't want to stop this going through tonight because of the time delay. I can't believe a construction company would only give you 2 weeks. So I'd like kind of proof of that, but I'm willing to vote for this today.
Councilman Legman.
I agree with Mark. We're kind of hung up on motion and resolution. I think a lot of this could have probably been handled last week by maybe calling staff and say, hey, what about a resolution instead of a motion? Instead of doing it tonight and stopping everything, a phone call to staff last week when this came out would have been very helpful to everybody. And it probably would say resolution as opposed to motion tonight. The staff will work with us. Instead of just at the meeting, just a phone call could have handled this very civil and we could be done with this. So you know what, I agree with the resolution as opposed to motion, but a phone call could have handled this much better.
And I'll just clarify, the statement the contractors are making now is that they can't guarantee prices for more than 2 or 3 weeks. They're not saying they won't honor them. It could very well come back that they honor those prices, but the statement you're getting from contractors right now is we're really volatile. We can't wait a month or 5 or 6 weeks. Their vendors are telling them we can only hold our prices for 2 or 3 weeks. If it didn't get passed tonight, and we came back in 2 weeks, my concern is we're in the same situation because the UIB approved this number today. And so if it gets denied today and they don't hold their price, I basically have to go back to the UIB with a new number. And then I don't meet the 2 week, I don't meet the 4-day notice again. And it's this unending rolling of changing it to the UIB, coming back. It can't get approved here because we don't meet the 4 days. It's got to go back to get the new number. I'm not saying that they won't hold their prices. I'm saying this, it's a pretty standard statement you're getting from contractors today is we're not willing to hold our prices, you know, for a month. The number I'm typically getting is 2 or 3 weeks.
Keith Contour's on Zoom. Keith.
Keith, you unmute.
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead.
So, Troy is exactly correct. The volatility of the metal prices for ductile iron and stuff. I've talked to numerous different salespeople that supply this pipe for us or for the contractors, and they said the volatility, they're seeing price increases every 2 to 4 weeks. Just something that we've been dealing with ongoing with any project that we've been working on.
Councilman Coons.
Yeah, I was just gonna further reinforce what we've been talking about here. I'm employed in the construction industry, and it's difficult to quote people prices when your vendors adjust their prices from day to day. So, you know, trying to keep it for 30 days, you know, they're gonna move on to something else. There's more work out there than there are contractors. They're gonna move on. So I think it's a priority that we need to go ahead and pass just tonight. And we're all in the interest of saving the taxpayers' money. And that's by doing it right now, not later.
And just for clarification, this is ratepayer money.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
I have a question for legal. So even though this didn't have a resolution number appended to it tonight as a part of our agenda packet, the document that's before us looks and smells an awful lot like a resolution is the way it's worded. Is it possible for us to put a resolution number on this document after the fact based on the next numbering sequence that the clerk would have so that we could attend to this tonight and formally not have to redo it as a resolution and just put that number on for historic purposes?
So if it's a matter of storing the document for public record, we could put whatever number we would want on it. But I just want to clarify this, looks poor. It's on one, it's a couple paragraphs, but this is a contract. It incorporates the bid documents into it. There are whereas statements in contracts. They're called recitals. If you looked at the amendment of the previous item, it also has whereas statements. A resolution is just a written formal way of a council approving something. And in this instance, it would be approving this contract. So the only difference between a resolution and a motion would be in the minutes, when, if the council decides to approve this, it would say motion to approve this contract. This contract is the enforceable document between the parties either way, where there's a written version of the motion called a resolution that is drafted prior to the meeting and approved by the council, or whether the motion is made at the meeting to approve the contract. It has the same force and effect. If you want to have it numbered, so that, I think if any member of the public were to call the clerk, I'm sure you could quickly pull this up, whether you added an arbitrary number to it or not, but it is no problem marking approved this date. This is a document number and reference it in the minutes. It doesn't substantively change the agreement, so I don't think the contractor would have a problem with that either.
Okay, so that would be doable. The other question I wanted to ask you is if we didn't go that road, in case that wasn't acceptable to you from a legal perspective, might be acceptable to the contractor if this was determined to be a letter of intent. And then at the next meeting, we would clean up the paperwork so as to document everything. Would that be a better or a worse approach?
That would, I can tell you with letters of intent right now with contractors,
Would not
they're
work.
not, that would not
Okay.
work right now.
So we're back to, we could append a resolution number on here after the fact.
If you want to make the motion to say, approve the agreement by resolution number, whatever number we're on, by the next sequential resolution number, that would be fine.
Okay. Are there other council comments?
We
Because
have
if
to-
not, I'm prepared to, are you going to
We have to
public?
do
comment?
comments from the
Sorry.
public. There any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. The only question I had was, you had mentioned, it's over $400,000 contract. How much of that is paid for by roadway? How much is that a city expense?
Any other comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'm interested in the answer to that question. So if staff could answer that question for me, that would be great.
The agreement from 2016 is 100% city.
Yeah, roadway subdivision no longer exists. They
Roadway
were annexed.
subdivision was annexed. They had excess of funds in their account. We annexed them, took basically the money they had, and then agreed to the water main.
Okay, well, in order to compromise and move this thing along, I still believe this belongs in resolution form, but to get through this matter tonight, I'd like to make sure that this motion reflects the fact that we're going to append the resolution number, next sequence that the clerk has, and that in the first whereas statement, I would like to insert the language and duly awarded a low bid contract to the contractor, because typically we give you protection in these resolutions to you made that low bid selection, and that's in your staff report, but I'd like it codified for the record in our approval. And so I would make those two additions to the document for this agreement and offer that for council's approval.
Councilman Ellis.
Sorry.
Okay, motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Motion fails 4-4.
Do we need to move on to the next item? Can we? Okay. Take a motion to Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to authorize staff to sign the contract with the roadway subdivision water system.
Councilman Legban,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1.
Moving on, item 13. Motion authorizing city staff to sign contract with Erickson Construction for wastewater treatment plant upgrade, improvements. This time we'll have staff report.
So, I'm sorry, Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator Utilities. Last meeting, as was the issue with Brian's item earlier, we had the award of the contract with Erickson for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and that was conditional on the agreement with Holstone for the cost share, and then a copy of the executed contract. This is a copy of the executed contract. I can take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
And again, we got him to hold the price, knowing that full well it was coming to council this meeting.
Councilman Yerger.
Just a couple of things for the record. Again, this was on the previous council agenda, and it was on the council agenda as a resolution. And had we had the contract at the time of that resolution and its passage, we wouldn't be discussing this again tonight. But the contract was not forthcoming with that resolution, which is why we have it as a separate item tonight.
Yeah, the contractor wasn't ready.
I understand it wasn't ready, but we brought it to council anyway. My point was, maybe you should have had it ready before you brought it to council, and then we could have done it all at the same time instead of two pieces. And so the recommendation still would be, this particular motion ought to at least refer to the resolution we passed at the last time authorizing this contract, which was not forthcoming at the time. I'd like to have you give a little more explanation, if you will. I kind of asked this question, and that's what prompted some of this discussion about the contract. So can you enlighten me about the differences about the other parts of the Holstone contract that say that we're doing a 63% cost share versus this comes out to be something like 46 or 47% cost share? And I understand you said last time, yeah, they're not calculated the same, they're different. So could you explain a little bit how we get to the 46.6% share?
Sure. So you're referring to the substation. The new substation was a 63-37 split, and that was a straight usage. They were going to use 63% of the capacity of that substation, and then the 37% is an upgrade that we are putting in for future expansion or growth. So basically, it's a straight. If it's a 12 megawatt substation, and they're using, in this case, it was about 8 megawatts. That 8 megawatts is basically their portion for their building. And then the 37% is what we do for expansion. In this case, you look at flows, it's a little more difficult with wastewater, because when you put in a substation, you're dealing with only electrical. When you put in a wastewater treatment plant, you're dealing with aeration, you're dealing with chemical injection, you're dealing with electronics and monitoring and stuff like that. And it's basically the same concept. Through the process, HDR actually sat down with us early on in the process, and then again at the end, and looked at what the projected uses were. And it went in and it broke down pretty much every item on the bid list and said, this is the part that can be attributed to Holstone. This is the part that can be attributed to Holstone for basically every item. And then that subtotal was added up. And that's how we came to the $10 million range.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Can you also direct me to where in the agreement or the paperwork that's in our packet that Holstone provided its letter of support regarding the 46% cost sharing?
I believe by signing it, they would do that, right?
I don't know. I just was looking for that description of that to be in the agreement, like it was in the previous resolutions and contracts, we had the 63% was called out, as I recall. And I didn't see the 46% being called out here
No, it's
unless
a-
I missed it.
It's a one-time contribution towards the 21 million. So it's a flat $10 million collected over 15 years.
And HDR was at the preliminary meetings with Holstone, and we sat down, and that was all projected at the start. And that number we came out to was, the reason we didn't put the 10 million down originally was because it was an estimated 10 million. As the design gets more finalized, you're able to narrow that stuff down, and the $10 million ended up being pretty much spot on as to what their contribution would have been based on their contribution to the improvements, or their use of what the improvements were that are going in.
Okay, so I'll ask my question slightly differently then. $10 million and the commitment that they're paying as a part of this agreement, the $10 million. In the contract paperwork in our packet, can you direct me to the page where that specifically commitment is codified?
So that's not in the contract. That would be in the agreement. They're two separate documents. This is a contract with Erickson to simply do the work.
Right.
This has nothing to do with Holstone. This is a contract with Erickson, the contractor, to make the construction. It's the agreement that codifies the 10 million.
So in the Holstone agreement, that's the only place it does. Erickson doesn't need to recognize
Correct.
who's paying, because we're going to pay the whole bill.
We pay the whole bill to
Correct.
Erickson. That's what this is.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Jensen.
Keith Tonker is still on, maybe you can, I understand this work, this contract was, the bid for this came in significantly lower than was expected.
Yeah, this is Keith Contour again, Water Wastewater Superintendent. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this engineering estimate for this was 33 million, 33.4 million. HDR Engineering was pretty conservative, or maybe a little bit paranoid, just because jobs at Sioux City, Osceola, Iowa, and Blair, all of the projects that came in prior to ours bidding came in 20 to 25% above engineering estimates. So while HDR was preparing numbers for the estimate here, they contacted myself, and I relayed that to Brian and Troy, but they contacted us, and they were a little bit on the nervous side, knowing the cost of concrete, rebar, any plastic materials, electronics, any of that stuff was on the increase. So they were pretty conservative on the bid. The two bidders that we got were pretty hungry for the job. I believe, that's my opinion, they didn't win any of them last three jobs that I mentioned. So they were pretty hungry on it. I'd have been a little bit concerned that maybe somebody missed something if the bids didn't come in so close, but on a 21-4, I think that's what it is, job, the second bidder on the staff report that I submitted last meeting, it was only about $800,000 or $900,000 difference. So if there would have been a $5 or $6 million difference, I'd have been a little bit more concerned on maybe somebody missed something on the low, the low bidder missed something, but being the bids were as close as they were, we were pretty fortunate, I guess, for the city of Fremont and the industries and the residents of Fremont, that we got a bid that was almost $13 million below engineer estimate. And I can answer any other questions too, if you have any.
And that kind of goes back to the volatility of the market. I mean, I think a lot of the bidding that has gone on prior to our bidding our improvements out, they probably felt those material increases. And like Keith said, Erickson's, they're out of Blair, and they have basically been working on Cargill's plant for the last 3 or 4 years now, and that just got over. And I think their intention was probably they're in Blair. They're going to be tough to beat. Their intention was to, get a job in South Sioux City that's pretty close and spend the next 2 or 3 years on that. And I think they banked on that. And when they didn't get that job, they got really, really hungry because, you know, there's not that many jobs like this that go on at any given time. And so I think we were on the receiving end of an opportune bidding window where you had two companies that probably didn't have a lot to do for the next 2 years. Both came in really, really low. I mean, that's the way I explain it.
And trust me, we should have had the contract ready because we're really lucky they're keeping the price the same. Because we were really concerned that by saying, hey, we got to wait and sign the contract 2 weeks from now, they would have said, ooh, sorry.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Legban?
Seeing no additional comments, I'm a motion to approve the contract.
Councilman Jensen?
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 14, Resolution 2021-085 to approve preliminary plans, specifications, and estimates for the Fremont Rawhide Trail Project and authorizing mayor to sign resolution as provided by the state. So this time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Dave Godikin, Director of Public Works. This is the next step in the Rawhide Trail Project, hopefully one of the final steps. This takes the plans, specifications, and estimates that have been prepared by the consultants. And it's called preliminary plans, but probably a better term would be final preliminary plans. The last step of the way then is to take these to what they call PS&E, where they get the final review by the state of Nebraska for their final blessing, and then ultimately go out for bids on this project. The estimated cost of the project is now $931,000. Then when you add in right away, preliminary engineering, et cetera, the project costs on this, total costs on this project is right around $2 million, of which the city's share is 20%. And the reason there are two resolutions in there is the state likes to provide their own resolution in their format that they require the cities and counties to sign and approve. However, their format doesn't necessarily match our format, so we do a resolution of the cities and then request the mayor to be able to sign the state's resolution as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Make a statement in your staff report that I just wanted to get some clarity on. You said there's no additional cost to the city for this action, and the fund will, or the project will be funded by NDOT and the city jointly when construction occurs. That's
Yes.
paraphrase of your staff
This
report.
item went to the council in September of 2020, September 27th, 9th, whatever it was, the second meeting, to do basically the same thing for the 90% plans and then approve the cost estimates for right away at that time. And I had included all those numbers. And the total cost of the project has not changed since then.
And what
So
was that cost? roughly?
Right at $2 million.
$2 million.
That includes the engineering, that includes an audit, that includes the right-of-way acquisition, and then the actual construction of the project.
And the cost share was 50-50 or
80-20.
25-75? What?
80-20,
80-20.
20% city, 80% state.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve resolution 2021-085. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2021-085.
Councilman Coons.
I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Councilmember Gibson, I didn't record your vote. Thank you. Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 15, motion to approve contract for roof repairs at police station with Apple Roofing. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, City Council, Mr. Mayor, Shane Weimer, Assistant City Administrator on the city side. The Fremont Police Department is in need of a roof repair on the western portion of the building that covers the garage, portion of evidence, portion of the gymnasium, and a portion of records division. When it rains or snows, water continually drips through there, and we can't catch all the rain that's coming in anymore. So we went out for requests for proposals. We received 3 bids. Those bids are obviously on your staff report. Apple Roofing received the lowest bid, and staff requests that the mayor gets approval to sign that contract with Apple Roofing to get started right away. I'll take any questions that you might have.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Any particular reason this contract is labeled sample contract rather than contract?
I have no idea.
Is that an issue, council, with regards to this being a final contract versus the illustrative contract?
No, once it's executed, that's not a problem.
But this will be the contract. It will say sample on it forever.
Yes, it will.
Have there been previous repairs? I think there have been, obviously. I think you've mentioned them. I know Chief Elliott has mentioned there have been previous repairs to the police department building in the past. I don't remember if there were repairs to the garage.
Over the roof, yes.
Okay. And so when we have done those repairs, it seemed like there was air conditioning, and then you said there's roof repair. Have those come through council as resolutions?
I have no idea.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve contract for roof repairs at police station with Apple Roofing. Councilman Legband.
I make a motion to approve the resolution, or the motion, I'm sorry.
Councilman Coons.
I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 16, ordinance 5576 to amend section 3-231, sanitary sewer service. There's a request to suspend rules and move to final reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaven, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. Last July, those of you that were on the council may remember, came before you and asked to revise the city municipal code to reflect separation of sanitary and water on attached single-family homes, primarily due to the fact that one side or the other could incur some costs that were not directly related to their actions. If somebody was using wet wipes, or you had roots, or you had a disconnect on one portion of that split sewer, it could potentially back up sewer or into the basement of the person that wasn't directly responsible for that. And the council at that time approved that change. I believe during that meeting, I made a statement, something like there were a lot of, with the growth that Fremont was having, there were plats going through, there were building permits being taken out, and that there was probably a chance that you would get some people that would ask for a grandfather, if you will. The fact that This was passed, excuse me, after they had begun construction on their buildings. And here I am. We had a request for 3 specifically by Danny Martinez, who's a surveyor, for homes that had building permits that were taken out prior to the effective date of July 29, 2020. Those building permits were taken out, and those builders were not aware of the code change because it changed after their buildings were begun. There is a substantial increase in the costs to separate sanitary sewer after the building is built as opposed to prior when it was built. I think the intent was to change the way we maybe plat or the way we approach duplex lots in the city. The city does allow split services if the lot is a single lot with a duplex unit on it and it's one owner, because if there's ever an issue with the sewer or the water, that owner is responsible for both sides. So that owner would incur all the costs. It's when you have a building that goes up and then you try to split that lot into 2 separate lots, that you could have an issue where one owner could run into some costs that are being caused by the other owner. And that's why we went forward with the change last year. Once the building is up, the intent would be to put the sewer in. It involves basically breaking out 1 panel of the street, maybe 2 panels to get to the sewer, and then bringing a new line into where the house is going to be. These houses that had building permits prior, they had foundations, they probably had basement walls. To bring that sewer in, you'd probably have to rip up some driveway. You probably have to break into the foundation of the home. You'd certainly have to break into the side of the basement wall. I don't think our intent was to maximize costs for separating, the service in those situations. And I think those instances where that's happened are going to be relatively uncommon. And so I would be in favor, or I would ask that the municipal code be changed to grandfather in anyone who had a building permit taken out to the effective date of the last change, which was July 29th, 2020. And I can answer any questions.
Councilman Legman.
I don't really have a question. To me, from what I've read through this, I think this is a great compromise. I think it's a good idea.
Councilman Yerger.
Is the intent in the wording that you have in item 3 for, well, I guess my initial question, how long do building permits last?
I don't know. Probably a year or 2, I would guess.
So they do expire?
I believe they do expire, yes. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a building permit.
I'm asking because I'm not sure either. And the reason that I'm asking is whether or not this statement is intended to be, if they don't expire, whether they can go back in time for some time. I'm interested in understanding whether or not the intention is for this to cover any and all open and outstanding building permits for as long as they can go, versus, no, your aim here was to get to the point where there were some recent building permits that got caught up in the backwash of the action we took, and you're trying to rectify those near-term permits. Which is it? A near-term that might date back 6 months, or no, I'm really trying to date back as far as a permit could be held and or renewed and or renewed and or renewed.
The intent would be to grandfather in the people that weren't aware of the change in the code at the time they were building the home. The effective result of this would be it would grandfather in anybody who had a building permit, an active building permit prior to July 29th, 2020. If they did not have a building permit, my opinion, and Travis may want to weigh in, is if they have a building permit and it expires, it would not be covered by this anymore because they would have to get a new building permit that would be covered after. I can't say that that's not going to happen. I'm not going to be back in 2 years with another request from a builder who had a house and still wasn't aware of it and had had the house built prior to the July 29th, 2020 and wasn't aware of it. There is an intent here to prevent an owner from selling off both sides and just splitting the lots and going away. I think if 10 years down the road, if that house was built prior to July 29, 2020, and there's no building permit, I think that at that time, if that owner decided to sell that house off and tried to do a lot split into two sections, I think at that point, we would require them to do the two services. That would be my opinion. It's not to say somebody might not ask for a waiver of that, and a future council at some date might agree with them, but my intention would be this is only to cover the near-term people that were directly affected by this, within a few months of July 29th last year.
And I appreciate your sharing because I was interested in the rationale. I remember your exact discussion about the situations you just explained and your position that you took at that time. And so now we're basically turning what you said there upside down because the circumstance you said might happen is happening at least to a couple, three individuals. And so you're trying to rectify that. And I agree. I don't have a problem trying to rectify that, but I am struggling with whether or not permits, and I don't know the answer. If permits are something that can be perpetually extended, can they be? Are they time certain? They're good for 60 days, 90 days, a year?
I think you have to have something built on a permit in such and such a time. Now, you could probably perpetually stretch that out if you continued to show you were working on it. Again, I am in no way an inspector, but I think if you did that there's probably one way you could, I've seen houses take 8 years to get built by grandpa and the son building it, over 8 years on weekends. I'm sure they had a building permit. I'm sure that they didn't go back and keep perpetually.
Would there
that.
be a way then, from my concern, because to me, it seems like the way this is stated, this could be applied retroactively forever, as long as you had an active building permit. If it's renewable or not, I don't know, but this is open-ended. And if it's intended to just flow back so many months or a year, updated no more than a year prior to July 2029, these would sweep in your current issues and wouldn't open up the city to full retroactive implementation for anybody that had a permit prior to implementation in July 2029. Would you have any problem with our inserting some restriction that says dated no more than a year prior to July 29 or something like that?
Council can do what they want. I would not have a problem with that. I don't know what the date would be. The other issue is the reason this came up and what kind of started the whole thing was specifically at Gallery 23 and now at Blue Stem, we're getting what typically on the East Coast you call those row homes where there are 4 or 5 of them together. And the old code would have, not saying that's the way they would have been built, but would have technically allowed one service to the middle and then 5 splits. That becomes a very, very big issue for me when you have 5 services into a single service tap. And so one of the reasons we kind of brought this forward was when we saw the new plats from Gallery 23 and Sunridge and coming in, and we didn't know what was going to be there. And we started to worry that all these duplex lots were going to be split after the fact. So if you're going to do that, I would tie it back probably a little more than a year. I would try to tie it back to whatever the original date of the plat was. I'm not saying that if a lot is there and it's on the recorded plat, I'm saying somebody could have bought that very, very first lot on that plat, not known about it. And they could probably be in if their building permit was taken out between the date the plat was filed and the January or the July 29, 2020. That's probably 2 years. Does that make sense?
So Troy, if we look at section 11-322 application, talking generally about the application of the UDC, there is a provision providing generally for when building permits are lawfully issued prior to a change. And says that provided that construction was commenced within 180 days after obtaining the building permit. So I think that would cover the time period. So yeah, it's not indefinite.
It's not indefinite.
Correct.
With the language that, as it's written.
Yes, in section 11-322.
So that would be 6 months prior to the effective date then?
That would
Basically,
Commence work within.
commence work, so as long as they started 6 months before the effective date, their building permit would still be in effect and they would be covered under this.
So if that's the case, and you have additional language that reinforces that, is a change to subparagraph 3 that's being edited here to insert no more than, I don't know, 6 months or whatever prior to July 29th, not a helpful change?
So I think it would be helpful if we said, let's see, add comma after 2020, provided that construction was commenced within 180 days after obtaining the building permit. So I guess that would be,
I mean, we know what 180 days is prior to July 29th, so you could just
Yeah.
put the date in there.
Yeah.
You could just say January 1, 2020, and that's about 6 months.
2021.
Between January 1, 2020 and July 29, 2020 would give you more than the 180 days, right?
So any application that was approved prior to July 29th, 2020 would be fine. And the period for those applications ends 180 days after that building permit was approved.
And are you suggesting in
So add that-
agreement with me that we should add some language to the end of that sentence?
Yeah, so I would suggest adding, provided construction was commenced within 180 days after obtaining the building permit and diligently completed. And that's under the non-conforming uses section of the UDCs, and I think the council could have some, this will be addressed by Housing Levine for sure.
Okay. So when we get to the appropriate time, I'm going to ask that you recite that. I'll make an amendment to do that, because I think I'm trying to make sure that, Troy, your original concerns that you articulated when we put this into motion in the first place are still dealt with, because they were legitimate concerns in the first place. I understand these concerns as well. So we try to accommodate these without putting you in the hot water with regards to everything else if we're not careful. The other procedural question I would just ask, because it sticks in my mind, that when we make these code revisions, even though there's a red line in your staff report, and I appreciate the fact that this is an ordinance, my recollection was that we do red lines and clean versions in the ordinance itself. And that's not what we have in front of us. Is my recall correctly? Do I recall that correct? But it's not in the ordinance. It's just in the staff report. And my understanding was that historically we had done the red lines in the ordinance, and then the clean version followed thereafter approved. My recollection was that ordinances had both the red line and the clean version stated in the ordinance. I realize it's in the staff report, and we're going to clean it up.
Ordinance, and so it's the same information, it's just on the
We
staff.
just have to
report,
move
not
it
in
over into the ordinance. My recollection is that's the way we've done it in the past. So you know what you've changed, and you know what the clean reading is, and therefore you're
So-
granting approval.
So it's not in the staff report. It's Tyler probably just grabbed it out of order, because there's 3 files that were likely in there. The one markup, the one that's clean, and then the staff report. And so when Tyler puts it together, he probably just, sometimes we don't always get it exactly in the right order. And I'm sure that's what it is, because Troy
Okay,
did not
well,
have that part. of the
So then
staff
if
report.
all we need to do is take what's on the staff report under the current code states and move it over into the ordinance.
Yeah, there's a clean version there. So that is what.
Right, so we
You'll
move the
amend
red,
the
we
clean
move the
version.
red line out of the staff report and move it in to the ordinance.
Ordinance has the same language.
Yeah. Just not read.
language there just isn't read.
You're missing my point. My understanding is that the ordinance had to show both red line and clean version. We have one version in the ordinance. It is the corrected version. In the original ordinance, paragraph 3 doesn't exist. It's being added. And so my
Well, that's the way
understanding,
we've done it. If there's ads, they're underlined in red, and if there's, you strike things, it's struck out. So that's the markup version. It's first, and then the clean version is later.
right,
Yeah, that's the way we've
all
always
under
done it.
ordinance 5576.
Yeah.
Hey, Troy, could we hold first reading and then suspend the rules at the next meeting for second and third reading? Would that cause an issue?
And there's a member of the public here to talk on this too. The reason we're asking to suspend the readings is because they're at the time of the original request, and it's been pushed back a couple times now. We're getting ready to close on the property, and that's being held up by the inability to split the lots. And so they're not able to split the lots until this is passed. So that's the request. I know there's one member of the public that affects. I don't know how the other two would be affected, so I don't want to speak for anybody. I can, when you go to public comment, you can ask. them that.
Can we move on to public comment? Let's take comments from the public.
Jason Endra, 297 Capstone. Yeah, like Troy said, I pulled my building permit in April of 20, was unaware of the code change. We built the property with the full intent of splitting the townhomes like so many other ones have been done. Took it to Dan Martinez to get it done once they were completed so that we could get them put on the market, and Dan was a little slow in getting it done. Had them listed. They're sold pending, just need to get them split.
And how much is it going to cost?
If I had to add the second sewer, $25,000 per, it cost me $50,000 to do each one, because the way that was plotted out there, they were on Capstone, each townhome lot was plotted with one clean out. And you'd have to cut out a section of street about 4 times bigger than your desk over there. And I'd have to knock out half my driveway, and in case this didn't pass, I have either A, somebody that's going to be homeless because they can't move into their house and close, or I have to pay to have that second sewer put in. And they basically said about $25,000 per side, and I was with Fremont needing the more affordable housing, you try and keep your building costs down. So that's what I got. If you have any questions. Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street, Fremont. I have a question regarding your background then, because it said that when it splits into individual ownership lots, that they would require individual sanitary connection to each lot prior to approving the subdivision of the lot. And I thought that was something that was really pushed when this initially got passed. So in listening to Mr. Endra, I can appreciate where he was going with this. So what is the official stance? So it's not an issue as long as there's something that's signed that we will never be held liable for it? Because in the background on the second paragraph that you all have a copy of, it comments that the city would require individual sanitary connection to each lot. But now I'm hearing that we have this building built on A lot and being split, but we're not going to require it. So I don't have a concern with doing this one way or the other.
Any other comments from the public? Any additional comments from council?
So Councilman Yerger, I can just clarify for the ordinances in the packet, that's 2-307. The new ordinance just has to include all the ones in the old ordinance and the revisions. So since this is just adding something, we're good. I do think it'd be best practice to have, like we've done in the past. I think this was just since we're just adding a section 3 to it, that complies with 2-307.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm fine with, we move forward with, we make the amendment to item 3 with the wording that we agreed upon earlier for ordinance 5576 so that we can move this along. So I guess when we get to the appropriate time, if you would either I'd be recognized and I'll turn it over to legal for an amendment, or you can just.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? I do have council.
I don't know that we're ready. You haven't come back from public comment to council yet. So
I have, yes.
Well, you have?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll yield to other council members. Otherwise, we should fix this ordinance up with the requisite language before we vote.
Councilman Legband.
I was just going to second his amendment.
Okay, so Bill,
Read the amended language.
All right, so the amendment would be adding at the end of 2020, comma, provided construction was commenced within 180 days after obtaining the building permit and diligently completed.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Cast your votes to amend. Reading draft.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Okay. Now, I need a motion to approve amended ordinance 55.
So
Do we need first reading now? Okay,
Yes.
so we don't, okay.
Hold first reading of the ordinance as amended.
Okay, well now first reading.
So we need to make a motion in a second. We need to consider a motion in a second to hold first reading of this ordinance.
As amended, yeah, that's what I was, yeah. Okay. So again, I need motion to approve amended ordinance 5576 and have first reading as presented. Yeah, Councilman Legband.
Make a motion to introduce and hold first reading of ordinance 5576, amended ordinance 5576.
Councilman Sukram.
Second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0.
Now I'll have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing Chapter 3, Article 2, Section 3-231 of the Fremont Municipal Code and all other ordinances or part of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on first reading.
Now I'd take a motion, Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to suspend rules and move amended ordinance 5576 to final reading.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, repealing and replacing Chapter 3, Article 2, Section 3-231 of the Fremont Municipal Code and all other ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect on final reading.
Cast your final vote.
The ordinance is approved 8-0.
Moving on, item 17, closed session to discuss potential property purchase. I need a motion to adjourn into executive session. As with. Councilman Jensen.
So I move to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and for the further reasons that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest.
Councilman Legband.
And I will second that.
A motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Is there any discussion? The pending motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Please cast your vote.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
A motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing potential property purchase and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest has been approved. Discussion will be limited to discussing potential property purchase. No official actions or votes will be taken. Time is now 9:15. We'll go to the back conference room. Councilwoman Ganem,
Moved. Second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. We'll see you on Thursday for the special meeting. 5:30. Have a good night.